Game on.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining me on today's edition of Glen's Retro Show. I've made no secret that I really love the tiny arcades. I think they're really neat little machines. Now, a little over a year ago, I did convert one of the Pac-Man tiny arcades into the world's very first, smallest at the time, real arcade machine. You can see I have a little Daikon running on over here, and it runs a couple hundred arcade machines on here. I have a video I've already posted about this little guy. I have the joystick and buttons all set up on the front. Even set up a 5-way joystick on the back. But at the time, this was the smallest arcade machine out there. Of course, since then they've cut the Pi Zero down a little bit more, and I've seen things like the MMUs and the Dreamcast, and still smaller machines being made. But for me, that was a little triumph for me to making this really tiny arcade machine. Now, recently, Super Impulse came out with their tabletop line, so I couldn't resist. And in this video, we'll be talking about the tabletop version that I converted into a mini arcade machine. Again, true arcade tabletop in a really small form factor. Today on Glen's Retro Show.
Okay, this video is just going to be a quick overview of the actual build. I'm not going to go step by step. This build, like all my other Raspberry Pi builds, use the same basic principles. So I'll leave links down below to my previous videos, and you can see other parts of the actual build. But for this video, it's just going to be a basic overview of how I converted the Super Impulse cocktail cabinet into a small Raspberry Glenny Pi. So here is the actual tabletop here, and it's very easy to get into it. On the bottom, there's simply 4 screws. You're going to take the 4 screws out of the bottom of this unit, take off the legs, they pop right off, and the machine will open right up. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4 that you have to take out in the bottom of here to open it up. And there are 2 screws holding in the main PCB, and then 2 screws here which is holding in your on-off switch. So basically you're going to take this all out, and you're going to cut this wire here, which is to your joystick and buttons down here. And I desoldered as well the original speaker. The speaker is not that great, to be honest, but it does fit in the spot, so you're probably going to want to save it. And you probably could salvage the screen. I'm sure this is an SPI screen as well, but I really didn't feel like trying to find out what particular screen this is. The SPI screen is relatively cheap. I'll leave a link down below to the one I used, although as I did say in the video, the current kernel in the images I have will leave some graphic garbage down on the sides here. Now, I've also just taken black magic marker over them, and so they're basically not visible. And the screen this small, you do lose a lot of real estate, so it's up to you if you want to use the screen I'm going to put down below, or find another type of SPI screen you can use. But the good thing is that this is a 1.44 inch screen, so this is pretty much already set for the most part to fit a screen already. So you can see right here, I just turned it on, just so that this is the original Pac-Man. Now I did go in here and I did try and change the jumper settings on the other side. There are no other games on here, it is just Pac-Man. So they have basically flashed this with just the Pac-Man. You won't have Space Invaders, Miss Pac-Man, or Galaga on these boards. So there's a screen that I used right here. Now this is, I'll leave the link down below to this one as well, but it is the red version, version 1. And this does have some weird graphic issues with the current kernel in the Raspberry Pi software emulation station. It's not horrible. You will get some graphic corruption on a couple pixels on the left and on the bottom. You can either A, simply go over it with black magic marker so you don't see it, or try a different screen. A gentleman a year ago did give me a new kernel, which I just haven't tried yet, which supposedly fixes the screen and will make the display look a little bit better. But that's not what this video is about. This is just really how I converted this into a Raspberry Pi. And you can see back here, here's an arcade graphics asteroids marquee for my arcade 1-up down in the basement. I have to put that on as well. That'll be another video, I am sure. But again, you can see I just soldered onto the pins here. Again, this is all explained in my other videos. I'm not going to go too in-depth in it here. Now, because originally I was going to use this board and the main board it's attached to, I did end up cutting all this out just to make this fit, and I'll show you a little bit later it did fit, but I ended up changing it. I actually removed the display from the board and soldered directly to the ribbon cable because I'm a little crazy like that. But you can see it does fit in here very nicely because it's the same type of display. 1.44 fits in here perfectly, and technically you can just do that and use some hot glue to hold this in place, or do use the original unit that held it in place, the plastic cover. You have to do a little cutting just to make this board fit, but you can go either way. Whatever you feel is best, it will go in. You can see that the white part of the original stock screen would pretty much go right with this right here. So if you want this whole board to fit, you're going to have to do some cutting and some adjustments to make it fit in the original holder here, which is why I eventually decided just to take this off the board and solder directly to the ribbon cable, which is definitely not for the faint at heart. It's not easy, but if you're slightly experienced with soldering, you could attempt it like I did. And it doesn't always look pretty, but it definitely works. So originally I was just cutting this to try and size it down a little bit more, but I ended up later on down the road just changing how I was going to do it. You can see I did cut the plastic originally because I was going to make this be used, and you can see it does fit in here very, very nicely on all sides, but you had to cut down the plastic basically like this down here to make it fit inside the casing. So you can see I definitely changed it here. Here's what I thought originally was a Raspberry Pi W with the wireless built in. So after I built it, I realized that no, this was a regular Raspberry Pi. It was not a 0W, so there was no wireless or Bluetooth built in on here. So I kind of had to change how I was going to do this. Again, I try to always use what I have on hand, and you see it's a wireless. I got this off of eBay, and it was not wireless. It was a regular 0. So, oh well, a couple of bucks. But it was already, see, I already started the work, and I wasn't going to undo everything I did because I was trying to get this done in a couple hours. But you can see here's the display, but I did take it off of the red PCB. Let's see if I can zoom in here just a little bit here. Zoom it in and move this over. I don't know if I can move it over a little bit or not. There we go. And move this over a little bit again. I'm not going to be able to get in the shot if I go that far. So basically, I soldered the wires from the GPIO pins here for an SPI display directly onto the ribbon cable. It's very delicate. You got to definitely know what you're doing to go this into it, but I really wanted to just make this fit in as best I could. So I decided to go this route. Now there's connectors you can add here, which I'll clip on instead, which will probably be smarter. But again, I didn't have that, so I soldered directly to the cabling. Let me make a zoom in a little bit better on this one. You can see Donkey Kong is currently playing here on the screen. The flash went off, so that's why it looks a little dark here. But you can see that it's very delicate work to try and get this on here, because if you use too much heat, you will absolutely melt the ribbon cable here. And you can see right here, this is for the black light, or the LED light, I should say. The positive and negative, it'll kind of follow the traces here. So that's what's going over here between the 3 volts and ground. Then all the rest that connects here are ground, power, and the SPI display, the serial data connection going through. So I think there were 26 pins here, and I only had to use like let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 10 or 11 wires I had to solder onto. And just to be careful, because the soldering iron gets too close to the next wire, it can make that wire pop off. Or you don't want to. You absolutely have to make sure you don't bridge any of these. So you have to be very, very careful. So I would definitely recommend either leaving it on the red PCB and just cutting the plastic out, or getting an actual connector, soldering to the connector, and using this, slide it into the ZIF socket. But I like challenges, so you can see I did it the more difficult way. So again, you can see Donkey Kong's running over here, and I'm using some Kapton tape here for the heat, and just to make sure nothing moves as I was soldering on to soldering these wires over to the GPIO pins here on the Raspberry Pi itself. Now here's the joystick. Now it's very easy to connect. You can see there's 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 possible positions on here, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you have the 6 controllers and then 1 ground. And I'll have a pop-up here showing which wires goes to where, so you kind of know what that is. But this is usually very easy. Just cut off the wire in the back, unsolder the current cables, and solder your new wires into this here. And again, the joystick works very, very well. It's not a bad old joystick. I did have one bad one. Out of all the Super Impulses I have, which is something like, I don't know, 20 of them, having one bad one was not too bad, and I exchanged it. But this one was fine. Here's just another shot of it right here. Again, it's very easy to solder onto these. You go into the back, you heat these up, push the wire through the back, and you take the soldering iron off, and the wires will sit in here just fine. It even tells you it's fire and select. So this is usually what I use for my prime. Actually, I use this for my primary button, believe it or not. That's my secondary, little NES style, primary and secondary. And this is actually 4-way plus presses in. But the press in feature is not wired here. So if you wanted to do that for some of the feature, you'd have to wire it directly to the joystick. The joystick is a 5-way, up, down, left, right, and pressing in. But on this particular one, I didn't set up that internal press. Maybe I'll make a modification on my next one I do. So you can see the wires. I go through the back, and I always mark one black, so I know it's my first wire. It's also my ground wire, so this is definitely a ground. And again, I'll pull up a diagram so you know which buttons go to which wire when you go to connect it to your GPIO pins. Here it is. You can see it's going in through the back. Very, very easy to do. This is, I mean, you can use, this is an old IDE ribbon cable I always cut up, and I use those type of wires. I mean, they're a solid wire, so you can't bend them too much, or you can't bend them a lot, or they will break. But it's just a very thin, very easy to work with, especially in these small little receptacles here on the back of these units. So you can see right now, again, the display is hooked up, and this here is, I'll put a link down below to this. I love these products from this guy right here. This is a small amplifier. Now this particular amplifier does not have a pot, so you can't adjust it as easy. You'd have to do it either through software in the emulation station or set up some hotkeys. But I'll put a link down below to this amplifier. It's only like $3 or $4, not a lot. He does make other kinds as well. He makes a lot of small things for the Pi. But for a little simple amplifier for the Raspberry Pi Zero, you need to put one of these on. Now, if you obviously cannot put a 3 in here, at least not a current 3. But I do hope in the future that the Raspberry Pi Zero, they add sound on here and maybe a faster processor on here. But for right now, if you want to have sound, your choices are to go use the USB audio, which is definitely better. The USB audio is going to sound a lot better than this. There's a lot of static, a lot of interference on it. But again, I use for what I have at hand and try and get as small as possible. So again, I'll put a link down below. Just a small, tiny little amp you can use for these projects. So you can see it's already running. There's not a lot that has to be done here. I mean, you got your Pi Zero, you have your software image, wire up your display, wire up your sound, and then you can see down here is the control panel. And that's mostly it. Then it's really just cutting the case and getting everything to actually fit. You can see here, again, I had to go use a USB OGT cable to put in a wireless card and a keyboard because this was not a W and I didn't have the Bluetooth abilities or the Wi-Fi abilities built in. So I had to kind of cheat a little bit. But you can see it does work, even though there's a lot of focus. It just comes together fairly quickly. Here's just another shot showing. You can see the graphic corruption you'll get with this red display. Now, I know there's other versions of this display, newer ones, I guess don't have this problem. But the red one apparently does. You can't see the corruption on the bottom of this one because I think I'm holding the display a little bit too low. But you'll see basically this down here. Now, I originally just used black magic marker to cover these up, and you could do that. You'll never know it's there at all, or put some, black electrical tape. But I do want to try at some point trying the kernel that was given to me to replace the kernel operating system on the Raspberry Pi Zero here. Supposedly it will fix this corruption. So at some point I do want to try it. So that's why I didn't put the black marker on here. It's something I want to attempt in the future. So you can see now, since this was not a Raspberry Pi W, if this was a W, I would have put this right in the middle, and I still would have cut this for the SD card slot. I would have put it right in the middle. This way, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the screw slots will still be used. But since I didn't have wireless capabilities, I had to basically make it so I get a USB Ethernet or keyboard or a Wi-Fi in here. So I decided, okay, I'm going to put it in the corner. So the SD card's here. I have power coming in here and USB. But in doing so, this was blocked, and also the on-off switch pylons were blocked. So I ended up cutting them all off the top. But to be quite honest, this one here, this one here, and this one here is more than adequate to keep this thing closed. There's a little wiggle play on here. But again, this is my first time I'm doing it, and I didn't have the right Raspberry Pi, so I kind of had to cheat and lose one lockdown point over there. Now, the next thing I had to do was I did remove all of the batteries have these little center place holders in here, so the batteries don't move. I cut them all out because I'm going to put a battery in here, and also the charging circuit's going to go in here, just because it was just easy to throw it in here. The auto switch will still be here, and you can see I added 4 holes here. This will be for inserting coins. This will be for starting the game. This will be for exiting the game. This will be doing a safe shutdown. And this here, 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 and here is where your legs will go in, and of course the battery cover will go here. And this is where your controller is going to be. So you just take your time. I marked where they were, and I take a hand file. And it didn't take too long. It took maybe 15-20 minutes to take my time, try and get as good as I can. It is what it is. You're never going to get them perfect, but you try and get as close as you can. Same here on the side for the micro SD card to go in and out over here. So here are the 4 buttons. They're just they're actually very long. You can see right here how long they were. I ended up using a Dremel tool to cut them off because I didn't have anything shorter, because they would be sticking out way too far. But when I made the holes, I just stuck them in the hole on the opposite side, and I took one wire, which is the ground wire, and I just connected the ground wire to each one of these with some solder and ran the cable off to the side. And then I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 independent wires to control each of the buttons independently. So you can see right here again, it's another shot. You just have to make sure that you're soldering to this end, and the opposite end has to be available. You can see it's kind of hard to see here, I guess, in this shot, but you can tell there's like a groove going down the middle. So, when you press the button down, this and this will connect. And I just chopped off the other one so I didn't make a boo-boo, because I have done that in the past. So I made sure that I couldn't make a mistake. So 1, 2, 3, 4 straight across for the ground. Oh, that's a better shot. This is a better one in focus. That looks much, much better. Again, I try and take pictures as best I can. My camera's not the best, but you can see here again, there are the 4 points right here, and they have to be on the opposite sides. I'm going to zoom in here because I think you can see it a lot better now. So you can see this is letting you know that this part and this part are disconnected. If you were to solder here into here, or solder here into here, the button would be on the whole time. You got to make sure they're on the opposite sides. So, I could have left this one here and this one here, but then I couldn't do one wire straight across. I'd have to do 2 wires per. So by doing it this way, I was able to cut this out of the way and run a wire all the way across to make it a little bit easier. A little less wires is always good. So you can see here's all the 4 wires done at this point. Zoom in a little bit right here. So you can see my one ground wire goes all the way across, and then each wire has a separate wire going for them. So it's just 5 wires versus 2, 4, 6, 8 wires going into the system. You can see here is a little USB Wi-Fi dongle I ended up using because I didn't have a Raspberry Pi W. And again, you can see how long these are. So I basically cut it down to about that length to go through here. Otherwise, I could have left them. This would have been really, really long, and I didn't really want to do that. So you can see here's where your joystick's going to be in the huge coin area. But the battery I use is from an old Sony camera. So I had to basically cut this area out here just to make it so I could slide the battery in. The battery was just big enough where it was putting too much pressure on here, and it could have cracked the plastic. You can see the buttons here, they're in here right now, how short they are. If I didn't cut these down, they probably would have been down to about maybe here. And that was just too long, so I just chopped them up with a Dremel tool. So here's the battery. It's a 3.7 volt. It's very tiny, only 960 milliamp. But when you slide it in here, you'll see if I didn't cut this out, it would have put a ton of pressure on here and probably interfered with the controller. And you can see the buttons are installed right here in the holes, and it held in with just hot glue. So hot glue is your definite friend working on these projects. So you can see the battery's in place, but it's actually sitting like right up into here. So I definitely had to cut it out. It didn't take too long. If you use a Dremel tool carefully, the plastic cut's really nice, like butter. And these actually just snipped off. The plastic that went across the batteries, I just used a small snipping tool, and I just cut them right out that way. So you can see the battery a little bit better here. It's just going past that point. It would have just caused way too much stress on this plastic, and either cracked it at some point or interfered with the joysticks for putting some pressure on the back end of it. So you can see right here, here's the hot glue. We zoom in a little bit over here as well. So I put the buttons in, made sure they worked obviously first before I put them in. Then just put them in their place, put a dab of hot glue. On-off switch here as well. This is going to go to my Adafruit 1000C charging circuit. And just hot glue that in place. Now because I have the grounding wire going on this back wall, I put a piece of Kapton tape over the grounding wire just to make sure that it didn't touch the on-off switch and cause a short of some kind. You also want to be careful of shorts whenever you're working on stuff like this. It's pretty easy to fry this stuff. I shouldn't say that. It's not super easy, but it's definitely a possibility. You want to make sure there's no chance of a ground fault of any kind in here that can cause any kind of problems. So again, here's just a shot of everything else. Once again, the Raspberry Pi, the joystick, the amplifier. It's very, very small, but it's a way to convert a unit that doesn't have real sound output into something that comes out. But this, I'm going to tell you right now, the quality you get out of these things is not the fault of the device. Just it's not very clean. It's very, very noisy. If you can go for Raspberry Pi 3 in a bigger project, you want to do that. Or if you have a USB port available using USB sound. Again, if I had a W, I probably would have put a USB sound one in here because it just sounds so much better than this. But again, I did not have that option in this particular time, so I had to go with a less quality sounding sound output. So I'll zoom in here again. You can see everything's starting to fit into place. Again, if I was doing it again and I actually had a Raspberry Pi W, this would have been right in the middle. So I would have had access to all four screw points, as well as the screw points for the on-off switch. You wouldn't have to glue it in place. But because I had to have these ports available, I decided to go this route. Now, I absolutely could have still put this in the middle and used the test points and soldered on two new ports on the back, but I just didn't really want to. I honestly couldn't be bothered. I absolutely could have done it, but I did not. And to be again honest, these three screw points are pretty adequate to keeping the thing held together just fine. And these wires are probably longer than they need to be. I always have extra length in here. There's room in here for everything to fit down without it really causing a problem. So again, you can see my controller. The 5 pins are all pretty much isolated down to the lower, or I should say the upper 30 to 40 GPIO pin numbers up here. And then the sound is here, as well as the display, and the this over here is going to be your on-off button for your safe shutdown, GPIO pin 5. So it worked out pretty well. Now I didn't cut out the hole for the mini HDMI, because when you set up the SPI on here, it's disabled anyway. And I had plenty of other Raspberry Pis to set up the SD card and then set up for SPI in advance. But you absolutely could. I mean, if you wanted to have other SD cards, you could definitely cut this out as well. Use this as a small controller and have it go into a larger TV set. You absolutely could do that. I just decided I wasn't going to cut out the hole here for the HDMI, but you definitely could do so. And then I just basically, once I pushed it in place, I filed these down just tight enough where it had a good snug fit here. So it held it in place pretty good. Then I just put a little hot glue right here and here just to make sure it didn't shift. And the micro SD card slot again is accessible as well. I do need to have tweezers. Again, I wish they made these soft eject. I mean, the Raspberry Pi 2s and the A's, I believe, have a soft eject. You press in and the card pops out. These don't. It just bugs me. So you got to get a pair of tweezers to get these out. It'd be so much easier if I can press in and have a push out. But that's something they don't offer anymore, I guess, or never really did. Just another shot here again. Now I didn't put a heatsink on the W. Again, I could. There is barely enough room for it. Again, for the games running on here, this thing really doesn't generate enough heat, so I really have to worry about putting a heatsink on here. But again, if you want to do that, you're welcome to do so. You can see there's still plenty of other GPIO pins on here, so you can definitely put in more buttons, another joystick, a secondary joystick, whatever you want to do. Your options are pretty open to whatever you want to try and do. Again, just another shot here of everything right here, the buttons, the display, Again, I put some hot glue on the wires once I knew everything was okay and nothing was shorting. And let me see if I can see the name of the device right here. Let's just go a little closer right here. Oops. Yeah, there it is. It's called othermod.com. So othermod.com, I really like his stuff. He makes a bunch of different little boards, a lot of small devices, very inexpensive, and he makes good stuff. So I'll put the link down below to his web store. I really like stuff that he offers. Sometimes they're out of stock. He even makes them in batches. But just one time these were not in stock, and I asked him. He said, "Oh, okay, no problem." And he made a bunch for me. So a very, very good guy. Othermod.com. I really like his stuff. You can see the controls back in place here. The joystick's all set up. The wires, just fold them down. There's a lot of empty space over here where the speakers are going to go. So there's plenty of room to put wires down. There's plenty of room above the pie here for the display and everything. So there's really, compared to the tiny arcade keychains, there's a lot more room in here. There's a lot more possibilities with this. Again, just another shot to give you guys another angle, seeing how everything comes in. The 4 buttons on the bottom and the on-off switch, that's what these wires are here. There's 2 wires coming over this way, and then I had 2 coming over on this side over here. And that's really it. And I'll put down a link in here, photograph of which GPIO pins we used for what, so you can at least reference it if you like. So you can see 2 of these wires coming down here are going to be going directly to the Adafruit 1000C for the on-off button. So this on-off button will control one of these right here. And then the other 2 are simply used to supply power to everything else inside. So I ran it through these holes that were already in here for the battery compartment. And again, you see the display over here and the othermod.com sound amplifier. And then slowly pushing things in. The speakers in here, once again, speaker is not great quality at all. I think I can get better sound out of it if I did use the USB audio out of here. But again, the Pi Zero is infamous. I could probably put a couple of capacitors on here, resistors on here. That'll help with the sound. But for right now, it's going straight out. So there's a lot of interference on it. And again, you have to be very careful working in this area right here. But at this point, it's really just putting everything in its place. And again, I'm just taking another shot here to show you the bare board. And I get it really close in here. You can see everything has to be soldered very carefully. There is definitely room. It takes a little practice. But you can see the actual part number for the display that I used. And I will put a photograph in here as well, showing which pins on here are used and for what. But if you want to do it this route, if you're good at soldering, see, I'm not spectacular. I'm pretty good. But flux. You definitely make sure everything is fluxed. And that really helps a lot. And just be careful not to use too much heat, because too much heat will definitely damage the ribbon cable here. And just another shot, 'cause I like taking pictures. But you can see once again all the wires that go to that display. So you can see by doing it this way, I was able to reuse the original holder in for the display. Again, I would not have had to have cut this out. I cut this out originally because I was going to leave the whole board in place, but I opted against that and end up going just with the bare board ribbon cable here. But you have to be very careful. Again, all this twisting, turning. They could definitely shift these or break or tear this thing. So you have to be very, very careful. All these parts here were from the battery compartment. These were the separators for the batteries. As you can see, I covered the amplifier in some Kapton tape. So when you start pushing things together, there won't be any shorts. All these things should be covered in Kapton tape, just to make sure nothing's touching and shorting as you're starting to close everything up. So once again, I used a piece of Kapton tape just to make sure things didn't shift, so I knew everything was going to sit as I started closing it. And just make sure when you're closing it, you don't pinch any wires. You can see I have some wires coming here for the back buttons. You want to make sure it's not here and it gets pinched off. This area is completely free, but your display is all coming on this side. So just be careful when you're closing it. Again, I cut the whole section off here. You can see just the basic one. I did do it at this point. That has to be cut off to make it sure it fits inside the unit. And just booting up, you see this is just a boot up process of the display. Before you close everything up, you want to make sure everything's working. You can see it is, but now you can see the slight video corruption here on the bottom of this display. Oops, a little too far down. So you can see it on this side right here and here. This is something that might be fixable. It might not. If it's not, my next Pi will simply use a different display. A friend of mine has a possible source of a much better display I might want to try. This is a low resolution screen. The one he has might be a high resolution screen, so I got to try it out. But once you know everything's working, at this point now, it's just really make sure everything fits in here, being very careful closing it up and putting some screws in. So here's the bottom of the unit. You can see the batteries in place. You have your negative and your positive. And this is a Adafruit 1000C. I've pretty much found the 500Cs worthless. They can't really charge and run anything at all that I've been able to try. So I got to go for the more expensive 1000C. And you can see right here, here is the 5 volts going out, negative and positive. This is being run to the Pi itself. This is the battery and ground. So my battery is coming from here into this spot. And then the EN and ground is going to the on-off switch. When it's put in the on position, it actually closes the circuit, and that tells it to start running the unit. The light here is saying it's charging the battery. You see I have a micro USB going into here. So right now, this is really just sitting on top of the battery with the door closed. I will be having an external charging port here, so I can either use the one in the back, which just powers the Pi right up, doesn't do anything with the battery. But if I go to this one, I could charge the battery and turn this to the on position and run the machine again from the battery. But it fits in here perfectly. It's like it was made for it. This battery and this charging circuit closes in the battery compartment just fine. Then just really close it up, and that's it. Now, here is the battery doors for this. The one thing you need to do is you can see these two little lines here which keep the batteries again from moving. You have to snip them off. This has to be totally smooth. The door will close, but it will bend a little bit because the on the back of the charging circuit, this little cap right here will hit that and cause it to buckle just a little bit. You can leave it alone. It's not going to hurt anything. But I decided to cut them off, and it just made it sit perfectly flush. And you can see both are charging on here. Again, between these two, you can see this is a lot bigger than this. So this was definitely easier to work with and get everything to fit. This was more of a challenge, but I do like a challenge, and I do like how this one turned out a lot. Now, I don't make these for people. A friend of mine, Neil Henry, over at the Old Made New forum on Facebook, if you message him, he will build these for you. I mean, I did these for myself, and he saw them, and he found a way that he can build them fairly quickly, which I feel great for Neil. Neil does great work. I have some of his items. But if you want to have one of these built, and he doesn't do this one yet because he's in Canada. These aren't available in Canada yet. But he has been making these for people. So if you want to make a small Donkey Kong or something like that, I'll put a link down below to Neil Henry at Old Made New, and he can make them for you. I'm sure these will come as well once he's available in Canada. I just want to be first. After that, I don't care who builds them. Okay, so once you're done, you can see it does close up just fine. Now, this bow you're seeing on here was always there. I have 2 of these units, and this bow was on both of them. So it's just the way that gets the plastic is on these machines. The wires and everything inside is not causing this bowing effect. You can press it down just fine, but it'll still bow back up. Even if you buy a brand new one out of the box, I'm sure you'll see this still has a bow here. But for the most part, you won't really know this is any different by just looking at it like this. You can see on the side here, the micro SD card slot is here. If it had a soft eject, it'd be so much easier, but right now I gotta take a pair of tweezers, grab the card, and pull it out. But again, unless you're making a change, you don't have to really touch it. But I do like how this thing looks. I mean, I think they did a really nice job making this look like a cocktail cable back from the 80s. And again, if I had a Raspberry Pi W, you would not see these at all. I would not have these exposed. But because I did not have any way to get wireless on here, I use an OTG cable back here, and I can plug in a keyboard or a Wi-Fi adapter. And then since I did it anyway, I can always power the unit from here. If you want to make it look like a regular arcade cocktail cable, and power cords coming out, you can have it coming out and running just the same way. You can just barely see the buttons down here on the bottom that I added, and you can see the main on-off button right there. And then when you look at the bottom again, you can see I have 1, 2, 3 screws holding it in place. It's more than adequate. This one could not be used because the Raspberry Pi was sitting in this corner right here. And then you have my coin. I'm sorry, it's actually on this side, it's upside down. This would be my coin. See, I filed it down a little bit too far. You can see a little hole there. So a coin, and then start the game for 1 player, escape the game, and a soft shutdown with the GPIO pin number 5 safe shutdown. And this is only used when using batteries. You put it in the on position, this will run on a battery. Off position, I can put a cable on the back and run it directly with a regular power cord. But that's really it in a nutshell.
Okay, we get a little gameplay footage here. You know, it's their brand new tiny cocktail table from Super Impulse, and I really like this. I mean, I think they did a really nice job. The one complaint I have is just how big the coin slot is here. But other than that, I think they did a really nice job with this little unit here. So I'm going to do a little gameplay here right now on it. Again, this is running a Raspberry Pi Zero, not a W. In fact, I thought I had a W, but I did not. So after I built this thing, I realized, oh my God, how am I going to get stuff on here? So I had to do some external connectors here for wireless and stuff like that. So it has a 1.44 inch SPI screen, which means it's running over like a serial device. It's not the fastest display. So for old games like this, you know, it should be fine. You can see the color's pretty good. This is the best angle I can have right now with it being played, but you can see it does have a pretty good color on there. There are other screens from, I know, Adafruit that actually has an IPS screen, and I'll try and make one with that a little bit later on down the road. But again, I always use what I have around the place, and I had a Raspberry Pi Raspberry Pi Zero, not a W, and I had this particular screen lying around. I had a small amplifier, speakers, battery, and I put it together in a couple hours. But I think it still came out pretty good. Now you can see here on the bottom and on the left there's like some corrupted video. This particular SPI screen looks like there's an issue with it. My other one does it as well. I'll pull this one over here for a quick second here. If I can get it in the camera angle shot here, I'll move this out of the way. This one has it as well. It's just this particular screen has some issues with the kernel in the current version of Emulation Station and RetroPie. Now, a gentleman about a year ago did give me a file I can try that he thinks can probably fix that, but I haven't had a chance to really mess with that. So, in any case, I'll do a little gameplay video here now. Again, on the bottom, actually I can show you on the side here, is the SD card slot. I put in over there. On the back, it has a micro USB and power. It does have a built-in battery, but the battery is not fully charged yet. On the bottom here, you can see I have 1, 2, 3 screws. The Raspberry Pi Zero is sitting over here, but it's so small it's fine. I had to take out the shaft here for that. And then we have insert coins, start the game. When I'm running on battery, this has to be pulled off. I can switch this to the on position, and it'll go onto the battery. And then over here is the escape and safe shutdown. And then of course in the front we have two action buttons, and our joystick. So I'm going to put a coin in and we'll try it out. Now I am missing some sound samples in this one. You won't hear the girders being broke. But small things I can fix later on down the road. And you can see the color is actually better when you tilt the screen a little bit. But right now, for me to play this, I have to lay it a little bit more flat. But you'll get the basic idea of the game. It is Donkey Kong after all. See, whenever you take chances like that, a barrel's always going to end up in your face. You can never go on those ladders because a barrel's definitely going to hit you in the face. Oh, see, oh my God. It's definitely hard playing through a viewfinder as well. Again, we all know I'm not the best at these games regardless, but I'm better than this. Yeah, that's better. Nothing like playing the world's smallest Donkey Kong. Yeah, the joystick feels pretty good. Again, I'm on a weird angle right now, so... Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Could I be in trouble? I might be. Uh-oh, uh-oh, oh! Yeah! Yes! So the way I have it set up right now, when it boots up, I have it run into a bunch of games independently, so I don't have to pick it from a menu. So I'm going to escape this game, like so, and it automatically goes right to my next game. So I have it doing this for quite a few of them, but it still goes into emulation station at the end. So we put a coin in for Carnival, and again, I haven't put sound samples on yet, so you're not going to hear all the sounds. This is a very fun game. I used to love this game. But you definitely have to get the sound samples on here. You miss half the effects without the music. So if I want to go out, I'm going to escape out again, and it'll automatically go to my next game. A little Donkey Kong Jr. action. Uh-oh. So the gameplay's pretty good. Again, the screen itself being an SPI, it's very sharp. But again, it's not the fastest display out there, so a lot of the more advanced games just are not going to work because the frame rate is just not going to get up there, especially with a Pi Zero. Oh! Let's see what other games we have on here. Let's escape out. Little Frogger action. See if you guys can see that a little bit better. Oh, so close! Oh, that's it for Frogger. Let's see what else we got running on here. Kangaroo! Good old Atari game. Let's see what else we got going on here. Ladybug, Pac-Man clone, but a very, very good game. Oh, poor Ladybug. I think the last game we'll try here is Mappy. Poor Mappy. So after working on both the Super Impulse Original Arcade, Micro Arcade, and the new Tabletop Arcade, the principle of building both are very much the same. Pretty much all the builds I have are pretty much the same. But out of all of these two, the Tabletop was definitely easier to work on because there was definitely more room to work on here. This required a lot more cutting, although it looks great. This one looks really good too. And I think this one might actually be easier to hold and play with a joystick. I'm not sure. I'll probably give both a little bit more of a play. So I want to thank you all for spending some time with me today on this episode of Glen's Retro Show and the world's smallest real working stand-up arcade machine and cocktail machine. These are pretty cool. I do like working on these projects, but man, they're hard on the eyes. But I do thank you all for watching. And if you did like this episode, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. And remember, no matter what you do or how you do it, game on.
Glen at the Tiny Arcade fan page. Remember, Don't admire people too much. They'll disappoint you.
Sit, Blue Blue, sit. Good dog.